all the KD is one of the great scorers we've ever seen. And I admire his ability to score. But the big question with KD is he a winning player? Is he a winning player? He's a great player. Nobody denies it. But is he a winning player? There was a feeling here that Butler would be a better fit for what the Suns needed. Not a better player, but a better fit. And we're seeing that in Golden State right now with how he's playing.
And I think for Phoenix, before the deadline, I made a post online about how, Butler could be a better fit for Phoenix, and KD, Butler offers a different style. I think that was the phrasing that I used. A different texture to that offense he could add. Half his shots come at the rim. KD's a perimeter-based player. The Suns are lacking at-rim chances. Butler adds that. And that's what we're seeing in Golden State, as you said, with Butler, what he's adding there. The Warriors are near the bottom of the league in at-rim attempts. Butler is somebody who helps there as a cutter, as a driver, all of those things. And with Phoenix, that's why they would have been willing to do that with KD. Not to mention, KD is not the same level defender he was at his peak with his years in the Thunder, his years with the Warriors when he's playing the 5. He's anchoring an elite defense with or without Draymond on the floor. I think the Suns would love to be able to use KD at the 5 this season, but he's not proven anytime they've done that he's able to do that. That's why they still have Mason Plumlee playing this. That's why they had to go get Nick Richards. That's why they were relying at certain times on Nurkic. Why they drafted Gambadoro in the second round. Like, Oso's a good player. I think he should be playing over Plumlee, but they can't go KD at the 5. And that's one of the limitations with KD. And ultimately, you nailed it though, Gambo. The leadership aspect. That's what I look at with the Suns team. I see them losing to Charlotte and I see them losing to Toronto. I'm like, where is the leadership from KD and Book and these guys who are these awesome players? It just feels like they don't have any of it. And that's the missing piece really from their star players.
When Chris was here, he dragged guys into being great players. Chris Paul dragged DeAndre Ayton into being a really good player and helped him get a max contract. KD operates individually of the team. Great player, but he operates individually of the team. Booker's not a leader. So they're lacking that. When Monty was here, you had Jay Crowder. Jay was a leader. You had Chris. Chris was a leader. They're lacking that. When they lost to the Spurs the other day, Durant kind of yelling at Bud, we got to get out somebody out here who could guard. You're making $60 million a year. You go back and help on defense. You'll see a lot of times, KD, something happens, he turns the ball over, he doesn't hustle back. And again, I don't want to knock KD too much because he's a great player, but this team is terrible defensively, so bad defensively. The Raptors are not even a good three-point shooting team. And if you go look at the 6, and I charted this last night, the final 5 minutes of the game, they knocked down 6 straight threes. 5 of them completely uncontested. 5. Only 1 was contested. Book got very close to, I think it was R.J. Barrett. Everything else was just wide open. They don't defend very well. They can score, but they don't defend well. I don't blame them for going to get KD. I was not in favor of the KD trade. When they originally tried to get Kevin Durant under the previous ownership, they were willing to give the Nets one of the two. You could have Mikal and Cam and Jay, but not the picks. Or we keep these players and you can have all of our picks. Matt comes in. This organization's never won a championship, so I don't blame him. Trying to win. Kevin Durant's still in his prime. You give up the picks, you give up the players. But then the problem was you doubled down on Beal, and you gave up a lot of picks in the Beal trade. And you could have done Chris Paul for Jordan Poole. Not that Poole's any better than Beal, but at least he didn't have a no-trade clause in his contract. And then you make the Nurkic trade for DeAndre Ayton. And as you mentioned, best player in that deal ends up being Toumani Camara. So you go KD, then you go Beal, then you go Nurkic and Allen. And it just hasn't worked out. The fit hasn't worked out. And now, you're going to have to trade KD in the summer because you don't have a lot of assets going forward.
You mentioned Matt Ishbia coming in as a new owner. This is like classic new owner syndrome. He's doing everything possible, going completely all in, trying to win now, and not really, as you said, negotiating that deal quite as much because it's KD. It's understandable. It really is. He's Kevin Durant, right? Sure. And I think even the Ayton deal, my understanding is Ayton and KD Booker and KD were not the biggest fans of Ayton. They didn't have full trust or faith in him to be that guy. So if your best players are saying that, yeah, Ayton has had some flaws. He's not a perfect player, very inconsistent. You did need to constantly push him to continue playing at a high level as Chris Paul did. I understand a lot of those decisions, but you are in this spot now. Do you sense that Ishbia is going to continue doubling, tripling down and trying to win? Or is there any sense that like, hey, maybe this is the final run here and then you pull the plug on everything this offseason?
We've had Matt on the show a few times, and a few months ago, he mentioned to us that they're not going to stay in the second apron. They can't. You can't get to the point where you pick a frozen and they move to the end of the draft. They're not going to get to that point. So this is it. Like, this is it. If they don't win this year, which they're not going to, they have no choice but to try to trade Durant. Now, in trading Durant, they want two things. They want young players back and assets. They want both. Now, Houston has all the Suns' picks. So it doesn't pay for the Suns to tank when Houston has their picks. So they're in a tough spot because if you want to trade KD and you don't trade him to Houston and you want to tank a little bit, you don't want to do it because Houston's going to end up your pick. So you got to try to be competitive and build around Book. As long as Booker wants to stay, you can get back a couple young pieces and some future assets with the draft picks. I think they'll have a softer rebuild. I don't think they'll tank. But I don't think there's any question. The guy you have to move is Durant. Not because he's not a great player. It's because he can bring you back 2 or 3 young players and hopefully 2 first-round draft picks in the future.
And that's without a doubt. Like, you have to try to trade KD. Obviously, prior to the deadline, it was reported that Minnesota went after him. They don't have the most assets necessarily. They do have Anthony Edwards with his relationship with KD. I think KD would really have to push and leverage his way to Minnesota for that to actually end up happening. With only 1 year left at his age, maybe he does have some leverage. That'd be the fear for Phoenix, is if KD does leverage his way to a team where they can't offer a ton of picks and young players.
I think I love the Minnesota roster. I do like the Minnesota roster.
So you like what they can offer?
I like what Minnesota, because they have size and they swept the Suns last year.
Yeah.
And we're looking at like Alexander Walker and like, wow, God, I'd love to have a guy like that. They've got size. Look, the Suns, after they got swept by Minnesota, Kevin, they identified 4 areas of concern. One was coaching. So they got rid of Vogel and they brought in Budenholzer. That's been a disaster. I've been so disappointed with Budenholzer. Like,
he might regret taking the job too, right? Do you think he regrets it as well?
I mean, he might. The Suns went after him years ago when he was in Atlanta. He had 1 year left on his deal, $5 million. He ended up taking the Milwaukee job. But the Suns met with him. James Jones, Robert Sarver met with him. But he was more interested in getting the Milwaukee job if he could coach Giannis. And he got that job. So the Suns, tried for him years ago. They fired Monty. Monty didn't get along with DeAndre Ayton. He didn't get along with Jay Crowder. Then you bring in Vogel. You fire Vogel after you bring in Bud. So far, it's been a disaster. It's just, to me, there's no fire, no passion. Why are you not playing Ryan Dunn? Why are you not playing Oso Iguodaro? What? Tyus Jones was a good. You remember Tyus Jones with Memphis? He was good. John Morant goes out. He was good. What happened? Like, why is Tyus Jones not a good player anymore? Plumlee was better than Eubanks. Why is Plumlee struggling so much? Devin Booker's having a bad year. Not even consideration for an all-star. This is a down year for Book. To me, why are so many players struggling under Mike Budenholzer? So they brought in Bud. They thought they needed a point guard. They bring in Tyus. They bring in Monty. They wanted better depth. They get Plumlee instead of Eubanks. They wanted youth and athleticism. They draft Ryan Dunn, Oso Iguodaro. They thought, and a lot of us did, that they were going to be a top 4 seed in the West with 50-plus wins because of the moves they made. It hasn't happened.
And it doesn't look like there's any chance of it ever happening again because, as you said, this is probably it.